But just to do a quick overview, it's been over 5 years since Torkel first released Grafana into the wild as his kind of Christmas vacation hackathon, scratching his own itch project. And so that's half a decade. It's, kind of surprises me that it's been that long. And it's been about 4 years since we began operating as a company. When we first started, we were called Rain Tank. That was really kind of stupid in retrospect. Now we're called Grafana Labs. It was Anthony, Torkel, and myself just trying to figure things out and accelerate the Grafana open source project. And it's been 3 years since we, I guess, actually turned into a real company, because the first year was just doing open source Grafana and not even having a product that we tried to offer. So our first product 3 years ago was Grafana Enterprise. And the first version of Grafana Enterprise was kind of just support. There wasn't anything else to Grafana Enterprise. If you wanted to pay us for help and making, kind of de-risking Grafana, we would be glad to help you with that. And it's been about 2 years since we launched Grafana Cloud. And that was the thing which we were most excited about when we launched the company, because we felt that was kind of the easiest way to monetize the open source project, right? So clean. The project can be 100% open source, and we monetize people that want to have us run it at scale. And at this point, Grafana Cloud's doing pretty well, and I'll share more about that. So let's recap in terms of accomplishments and milestones since the last GrafanaCon in the last year. The first thing I just want to hat tip to and acknowledge is we announced this at the last GrafanaCon. In fact, that picture is from the last GrafanaCon, where Tom Wilkie and David Kalschmidt, who had started a company called Causal, we announced that we were acquiring them and joining forces. And since then, I think we've accomplished some pretty incredible stuff together. It's been less than a year since the transaction closed, and Tom and David have been hard at work doing some really cool stuff and have really evolved our product offering. Obviously, the big announcement is Loki, which is in early days and something we've been working on for a while. But we also now have Prometheus support for both Grafana Cloud as well as our enterprise customers. And we're seeing some really strong demand and interest as Prometheus continues to gain adoption and accelerates, which we're actively trying to support. We also did a fundraise, our first equity fundraise of the company. We'd only raised debt thus far. We raised $2.5 million of new money. This was just a few months ago. Kind of a small amount by today's standards, right? That was the first question I got. Like, you guys only raised $2.5 million? Why didn't you raise like 20 or 50? And but we did it without going to VCs in a non-institutional way. So we managed to find about a dozen or so people, call them angels, who believed in what we were doing and kind of made sure that we got what we wanted, which was complete control of our destiny. Our starting point was pretty interesting, though, as we shared with you guys last GrafanaCon. We've managed to build the company and not really have a burn, per se, right? So we're not like really losing money every month. So we didn't really need to raise the money. And as I'm sure most of you can relate to, even if you haven't raised money before, it's the same principle as getting a loan from a bank, right? What's the best time to get a loan from a bank? If you can prove to them that you don't need the money, right? So same kind of principle applies here. Like the fact that we had basically zero burn allowed us to do a deal that gave us a lot of control and won't hopefully force us into making any choices or decisions that we don't want to make. So if we have zero burn, then why do we raise the money? Why did we need it? Well, we wanted to go a little bit faster and really invest in our people. We think we're going to be, when this slide was created, it was a few months ago. So by this time next year, it should be about 120 people, up from 50. And we want to scale the company, especially on the commercial side. So we're really making significant investments for the first time on sales, marketing, go-to-market. So last GrafanaCon, we had basically no full-time salespeople. It was entirely the founders and the engineers kind of doing all the sales. And we did that organically because we kind of wanted to figure out by sort of being really tight with our users and customers and organically figuring out what it is that they would find value for and what it is that they'd want to pay for. Now that we've kind of figured that out to some degree over the last few years, we felt it was time to invest in an actual sales team, focus more on marketing, go-to-market, and we've made some really awesome hires that I'm sure many of you have met on the sales side. Literally gone from 1 to 7 or 8 full-time people on the commercial side of the house in less than 6 months, and we'll probably be at 30 or 40 by the end of the year. So pretty rapid uptick there, and huge cultural potential impact for cultural changes, right? What happens when you have a company full of engineers and all of a sudden you start adding a bunch of salespeople? Interesting times. Tom and Torkel already talked about this, but just mentioning it again here. Really psyched about Loki and Explore. Incredible launch. Super happy with that. That ties into the whole LGTM stack that Torkel mentioned. So Grafana is moving way beyond metrics. Logging is next, and we will be tackling tracing soon. So that's a little overview in terms of highlights over the last year. So I just wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about culture, because it's super important to us, particularly as we scale our team so fast, right? Like it's something that we didn't really think about for the first year, but in the last year especially, it's been top of mind. So I wanted to share with you 3 aspects of our culture, and I recognize that when you talk about culture on a slide deck, it's kind of ridiculous, right? I mean, culture isn't what you write down, it's not what you want it to be, it's solely a decision, it's solely how you behave, right? How you reward people, what kind of behavior you actually encourage. I mean, so that being said, you have to try to define it. So Matt and Tom have mentioned this word post-geographic. We don't want to be like a typical multinational corporation. We think of ourselves as different, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that. Open is another one, and long-term greedy is another attribute of our culture. So let's talk about post-geographic. We've used the word remote first. It means that we want to hire people regardless of where they are. We currently have 50 people in about 13 countries, and we really feel that this allows us to build sort of this incredible team that would be impossible to get if we weren't remote first, right? I mean, Grafana Labs has literally, and this isn't just hyperbole, but has some of the most talented people I've ever had the privilege of working with. And I don't think we'd be able to hire even close to that team if we required them to all be in one office, say in San Francisco. It just wouldn't happen. So, remote first is a really important aspect of our culture at Grafana Labs. The funny thing is about half our company works in offices, and we're actually trying to hire more people who don't work in our offices so we can actually be more remote first and kind of go all in on this concept. So it's kind of funny in that regard. And this also makes sense not just to get the best talent, but it's also kind of in line with how the open source communities that we participate in operate, right? All these communities are spread out all over the world. They operate in an async way, and so as we align our company, particularly our engineering, to do the same thing, it's kind of a better fit with the communities that we participate in, such as the Grafana community, the Prometheus community, so on and so forth. Open, buzzword, right? I guess every company's like, oh yes, we have a very open culture. But obviously it means open source primarily. I guess we're not as pure in some ways as we might have thought, or that as pure as say Percona, who was just up here on the panel. We do have commercial software. We're very upfront about that. We don't try to hide it. We're not gonna come up with a confusing license that tries to blur the lines. We're just upfront. Grafana's open source. Some of our software and some of our integrations aren't. But 95+%, probably 98% of what we do is open source. Definitely impacts and is a large part of our culture. We're also open in the sense of being transparent, both internally as well as externally. That's why I'm giving you this update, and I'm going to share with you all sorts of metrics about what the company's achieved. And we're also open in the sense of having a big tent. And what do I mean by a big tent? Well, I'd summarize it by saying we have many frenemies here for the greater good. And what I mean by that is, it's kind of funny, and a lot of people ask me this question, but they say, like, wait a minute, like, you guys are going to have Stackdriver talking on stage about how they're doing metrics and logs and tracing, and isn't that what you guys want to do? You're going to have Influx Data come up and talk about Flux and Chronograph and their time series database. Aren't you trying to promote Prometheus? You're going to invite Elastic to your conference and have them talk about logging solutions. Aren't you guys trying to do Loki? Like, why are you inviting all these competitors to your conference? And the answer is, we really believe that our mission at Grafana Labs is kind of bigger than that, right? We want to connect not just these data sources through plugins, but we want to connect communities and ecosystem, right? Through people, through technology, through, basically like operating this big tent. And we really feel like this choice that we offer has been such a key part of Grafana's success thus far. Grafana's never been tied to a single database. We're not a database company. Most of our competitors are. And we think that that kind of allows us to hopefully try to elevate ourselves to be more of a trusted advisor to you, because databases come and go, and you probably will never have one database that will store all your data forever for the next 10 years, no matter what the salespeople from the database company that you're talking to says, right? And that's kind of why we have our view of the LGTM stack. For us, it doesn't necessarily stand for Loki, Grafana, our tracing thing, or specific software. It stands for logs. What do you want? How do you want to use Grafana with logs? Are you using Elasticsearch? Great, use Elasticsearch. You want to use Elasticsearch and Splunk and Loki? Interesting, fine, right? You don't like Prometheus? You want to use InfluxDB? No problem. They have a fantastic product. I'll introduce you to Paul myself. He's a good friend of mine. So we really operate this big tent mentality, and we think that that even though sometimes it seems kind of annoying, or it seems like it's maybe shooting ourselves in the foot, it kind of ties in with this concept of being long-term greedy, we feel. We're really in it for the long run, right? We're still prioritizing adoption over monetization right now. We have a very permissively licensed software with Grafana. That's not changing anytime soon if I have anything to do with it, or if Torkel has anything to do with it. And we do have things to do with it because we're a non-VC-backed company. So we're definitely prioritizing adoption over monetization, even though we have no qualms about admitting that we're trying to build the next billion-dollar open source company. We are, but we want to do it on our terms, on our way, in a long-term greedy way. And that means doing the right things for customers today, right? Meeting them wherever they are, whether it's with the right cloud, with the right database, with the right enterprise offering, with our right cloud offering. So long-term greedy there. So now the juicy stuff, metrics, which we shared last GrafanaCon and will continue the tradition. So Grafana adoption is the thing we care about the most at Grafana Labs. If there was a most important metric, this would probably be it, right? This is what fuels the fire for us. So this graph ends at the end of last year, and we basically doubled the Grafana install base from about 120,000 at the end of 2017 to about 230,000 at the end of 2018. And at the moment, I think the number is about 260,000 or so. So we hope to double it, roughly speaking, again. Revenue. People think I'm crazy for sharing this, but anyway. So end of year 2016, our first GrafanaCon on the Intrepid, I believe, that year. So, yeah. We basically reached $1 million in annualized revenue. Most of it was support and professional services, because we didn't really have anything else to sell, right? We had no cloud, no differentiated software. That was all basically, Matt, Torkel, myself just hustling, I guess selling to our biggest fans would be the way to say it. At the end of 2017, we disclosed this at the last GrafanaCon. We hit about a $2 million annualized revenue run rate, and most of that came from Grafana Enterprise because we'd barely launched Grafana Cloud. So what about at the end of last year? What was our revenue 2 months ago? Well, we hit more than a $5 million annualized run rate. So we 2.5x'd, almost 3x'd our revenue in the last year, which we're pretty happy about. And the most interesting thing is most of that came from Grafana Cloud. So we've kind of flipped we've managed to grow our revenue, but also really change our product revenue mix, right? So we started with a lot of ProServe and consulting, and today, less than 2% of our revenue is ProServe and consulting. It's all Grafana Cloud, Grafana Enterprise, subscription revenue, and we're pretty happy with that. And we hope that we can basically do the same thing again, and that by next GrafanaCon, we can come here and tell you that we've 2.5, 3x'd again. We'll see. So just to end the business update, I just wanted to say a heartfelt thank you for the performance. This wouldn't have been possible without our customers. By the way, who here is a paying customer of Grafana Labs? Awesome. Thank you guys so much, by the way. I mean, literally, like, you guys are really directly supporting our efforts. Obviously, to our users, and maybe most importantly, to our contributors and our larger community. Without you, we wouldn't just not have a software project. We wouldn't have a business. So seriously, thank you very much. And that's the update from me. So thank you all.
Thanks, Raj. Have a seat. How does it feel to be on that side?
Feels good.
So we're kind of running a little tight in time, so we're going to make this quick. But if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and ask. Why do you think it's important for us to share this so transparently?
It's a really good question. So one of the things I mentioned on the panel is this balance between sort of our community and our customers and our enterprise customers. And I feel like the community and our user base has been, created this huge tailwind for us. And talking to our users, even who aren't our customers, they're really interested in the company. They're like, oh, you guys are the company behind Grafana? Tell me more about it. And I just feel, it kind of goes along with the open source ethos. The metrics and adoption revenue is one thing. The revenue is certainly the more crazy part about it. I guess we can. We don't have anyone telling us not to. And I guess the honest second part of that answer is the metrics are pretty good, so it's fun to share.
So kind of going into this next year and metrics aside, the Grafana community continues to grow. How do we sort of persist that culture, or at least kind of persist the organic growth and that organic adoption? Because I see this a lot with people that I talk to, is that we talk to the biggest fans of Grafana when they call us, right? And as we kind of grow into the bigger company, how do we keep that up?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So there's a few things that Daniel, who you guys just heard of, and Torkel are working on that I think will help us do that. I don't think it's one big thing. It's a bunch of little things. But one good example of how we're going to kind of like reinvest and double down in our community is we're actually going to open pull the curtain even more away from the Grafana development process. Meaning, Grafana is an open source project. We have issues and planning on GitHub, but we still have a lot of conversations and planning internally to talk about features and roadmap and priorities and how are we going to implement this feature or how are we going to fix this bug exactly. We're going to be even more transparent over the coming months, meaning we're going to invite anyone who wants to join to our planning sessions, to our calls, to really just be even more, I guess, transparent and open. And to be honest, I've taken a page of inspiration from projects like Prometheus and the way that that project operates out in the open, right? I mean, there is no company behind Prometheus, and even though there's a company behind Grafana, I think we can do a better job kind of being even more open. So that's the main way, I'd say, that we can address that, yeah.
Cool. All right, well, we're a little short on time, so thank you, Raj.
Thank you, Matt.
Appreciate the update.